Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. Today we are back with the book content. I am going to be sharing my 5-star reads of 2022. So this year my reading goal was 50 and I actually completed that, went above that, and I did about 60, I think, maybe just over 60, which probably won't be a lot to some people, will be a lot to some people, but I am happy with it because I beat my goal anyways. And out of the 60 that I rated about 10 5-stars, I think. So I am going to share them with you today. If you want to keep more up to date with what I'm reading, because I know I don't always share it on here, then you can follow my book Insta, we'll put it here, and also my Goodreads. I'm gonna go in order of when I read them throughout the year. So we'll start off with the first one and end with most recent. So the first book that I read this year that I rated 5 stars was actually a reread, so I'll get that one out of the way. It was A Thousand Splendid Suns. I've had to move slightly because the sun decided to come out right when I wanted to start filming. But yeah, my first one was a reread that was A Thousand Splendid Suns. If you have watched any of my book videos, kept up with my book content at all, you will know that this is one of my favourite books of all time. I have reread it about 4 times, I think now. First read it when I was about 16 and it's just always stuck with me. I'm going to read the backs of them all, by the way.
Mariam is only 15 when she is sent to Kabul to marry Rashid. Nearly 2 decades later, a friendship grows between Mariam and a local teenager, Layla, as strong as the ties between mother and daughter. When the Taliban take over, life becomes a desperate struggle against starvation, brutality and fear. Yet love can move a person to act in unexpected ways and lead them to overcome the most daunting obstacles with a startling heroism.
So this one is really sad for me. I will cry every time I read it. It basically follows, like it says, sort of the war in Afghanistan and sort of the Taliban takeover, but it follows Mariam from when she's 15 up until she's maybe 30s, 40s, and sort of the struggles that she faces in the midst of a war, but also as a woman in Afghanistan at that time. There's obviously so much more to it than that, but that's the basis. It just follows that character, her development, her story over a long time frame. It is just so good, so well written. It's honestly just up there with one of my favourite books ever of all time. So of course that one gets 5 stars from me. That one was the only reread, so we're going into new reads for me this year now. So the next one up that I rated 5 stars was The Song of Achilles. It just absolutely broke me. I love this so much.
Greece in the Age of Heroes, awkward young prince Patroclus has been exiled to the court of King Peleus. Despite the differences, Peleus' golden boy Achilles befriends the shamed prince. As they grow into young men, their bond blossoms into something deeper, despite the displeasure of Achilles' mother, the sea goddess Thetis. But when word comes that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped, Achilles must go to war in distant Troy and fulfill his destiny. Torn between love and fear for his friend, Patroclus goes with him.
I feel like this was literally everywhere, this year, last year, BookTok, Bookstagram, BookTube, everything like that. So I read it beginning of this year. I think this was one of my first reads of the year and I just absolutely loved it. I didn't particularly like either of the characters, but or the setting. I don't really like war, I don't really like reading about things like that. I do like Greek mythology, I find it interesting, but I don't really know anything about it, and I still love this. Just the way it was written, the love story, I was just obsessed. I was gripped, I was hooked. I really want to read it again and annotate it. But yeah, I literally just love this. One of my favourite love stories in the way that it was written. I think it was just written so beautifully. Then next up on my 5-star list was Normal People by Sally Rooney. But I actually don't have the book with me. I lent it to my auntie, so I don't have it here to show you, so I'm gonna read the blurb. So going off Waterstones, it says,
Normal People is a tale of deceptive simplicity, a very accessible narrative of 2 seemingly mismatching people who share a profound inescapable understanding. Beyond that, however, is something properly universal, a study of how one person can forever shape and impact another.
Basically, Normal People follows Marianne and Connell, 2 teenagers growing up in Northern Ireland. They are at the same school. Connell is the popular guy. Marianne is very much an outsider. She's very introverted, doesn't really have any friends, but basically it follows their relationship as they go through school and then in college as well. I just loved it so much. I loved the characters, I loved the storyline, I was gonna say the plot, but there isn't really a plot. Like, it is very character based, character driven, but I really liked that. I know a lot of people don't like Sally Rooney or Sally Rooney's writing, but for me I just think it's very realistic and I love the show as well. Next up we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I just absolutely loved this so much, like literally obsessed. This was my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book and still probably remains as like my top. This is another one that I want to like reread so I can go back and annotate it.
Reclusive Hollywood icon Evelyn Hugo is finally ready to tell the truth about her glamorous and scandalous life. But when she chooses unknown magazine reporter Monique Grant to write her story, no one is more astounded than Monique herself. From making her way to Los Angeles in the 1950s to leaving show business in the 80s, and of course the seven husbands along the way, Evelyn unspools a tale of ruthless ambition, unexpected friendship and a great forbidden love. But as Evelyn's story nears its conclusion, it becomes clear that her life intersects with Monique's own in tragic and irreversible ways.
Again, I feel like this is one of like the most popular book talk, Bookstagram books, which can always be a bit risky if they're like really overhyped, but I just loved it. Then another book that I actually rated 5 stars, but again I don't have with me, was Daisy Jones and the Six, also by Taylor Jenkins Reid.
They were lovers and friends and brothers and rivals. They couldn't believe their luck until it ran out. This is their story of the early days and the wild nights, but everyone remembers the truth differently. The one thing they all know for sure is that from the moment Daisy Jones walked barefoot onto the stage at the Whiskey, the band was irreparably changed. Making music is never just about the music. Sometimes it can be hard to tell where the sound stops and the feelings begin.
It follows like their rise to stardom, but for me it was like the layout of the book. Like, it's told in like an interview format, like not as a story, if that makes sense. I just loved it, and I know myself and loads of other people have said like it literally just feels real. I felt like I was watching a documentary for like an actual band that existed. Like, I was just obsessed. I just loved it so much. Then we go on to Verity by Miss Colleen Hoover. This is actually the only Colleen book that I've rated 5 stars.
Lauren Ashley is a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin when she accepts a job offer of a lifetime. Jeremy Crawford, husband of best-selling author Verity Crawford, has hired Lauren to complete the remaining books in a successful series his injured wife is unable to finish. Lauren arrives at the Crawford home, ready to sort through years of Verity's notes and outlines, hoping to find enough material to get her started. What Lauren doesn't expect to uncover in the chaotic office is an unfinished autobiography Verity never intended for anyone to read. Page after page of bone-chilling admissions, including Verity's recollection of the night their family was forever altered. Lauren decides to keep the manuscript hidden from Jeremy, knowing its contents would devastate the already grieving father. But as Lauren's feelings for Jeremy begin to intensify, she recognises all the ways she could benefit if he were to read his wife's words. After all, no matter how devoted Jeremy is to his injured wife, a truth this horrifying would make it impossible for him to continue to love her.
I just remember reading this and it was like the first thriller that I had read in a long time, and I was just gripped, I was hooked. I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was so good, and yeah, like I said, my favourite cohort book. I was not a fan of the extra chapter. Not a fan, but it just felt a bit unnecessary to me, and I'm still team manuscript. Then we have the only fantasy books in here and the only like series, duology, whatever you want to call it. We have Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I did give both of these 5 stars. I think I would probably say that the first one is my favourite, but for me they just come together anyways. Like, I class them both as one book. So like I said, this is the only fantasy books in this 5-star ratings. Follows this gang in like this obviously fantasy world, and basically they're all like different kinds of criminals, all have different strengths, but there's this like drug that is being made that would be like detrimental to the whole universe. And basically Kaz, who is like the leader of this gang, he is offered like a ridiculous amount of money to essentially steal this drug, like to break into somewhere and steal the drug, steal the person that like invented it. I feel like it sounds shit, like I'm doing a shit job of it explaining it, but it was just the characters. I just loved it. So invested in the characters, so invested in the story. That is why I gave both of them 5 stars. Next up we have Love and Other Words. This has some of my favourite romance tropes. It's a childhood friends to lovers, second chance romance. I just absolutely loved it.
At 13, you were my first real friend. At 15, you were my first love. At 18, you were my everything. We were about to take on the world together until one mistake shattered our future. Now, I'm about to marry a safe man who will never touch my heart, whose loss would never break me. He doesn't really need me, and that's how I like it. Until one day, I turned around in a coffee shop, and there you were. It's been 11 years and nothing has changed. I don't know how to forgive you, and worse, I don't know if I can resist you.
So this follows Elliot and Macy. They basically grow up like next door to each other. They like bond over their love of books, which of course I loved. I was all about. And yeah, they grow up as friends and end up getting into like a romantic relationship. So it follows them, their friendship, their relationship, until something like tragic happens and they don't speak for like, how long is it, like 11 years? So then it kind of follows them as adults trying to navigate the relationships they're already in and their previous relationship, talk through the past. I just loved it, and Elliot is literally my dream book boyfriend. Then we are moving on to Beartown. This was a really surprising 5-star read for me actually.
For most of the year it's under a thick blanket of snow, experiencing the kind of cold and dark that brings people closer together or pulls them apart. Its isolation means that Beartown has been slowly shrinking with each passing year, but now the town is on the verge of an astonishing revival. A bright new future is just around the corner, until the day is all put in jeopardy by a single brutal act. It divides the town into those who think it should be hushed up and forgotten and those who will risk the future to see justice done. At last it falls to one young man to find the courage to speak the truth that it seems no one else wants to hear. With the town's future at stake, no one can stand by or stay silent. Everyone is on one side or the other.
This was really surprising for me because I found it quite hard to get into at first. The majority of the book, or like the very beginning of the book even, is focused around this town, around like ice hockey. And at first I just wasn't vibing. But now that I've obviously finished it, gave it 5 stars, like I really solidly think that that whole like beginning bit, setting the scene, giving you the full picture of like the town, really does obviously help to set up like the rest of the story, so you can understand how like the rest of the story pans out the way it does. Obsessed with like the themes, the messages, how it like portrayed that experience. I just loved it, loved everything about this, and Benji will forever hold a special place in my heart. Then the last book that I rated 5 stars, and another surprising one for me, was If We Were Villains. This is like dark academia, mystery kind of vibes.
Oliver Marks has just served 10 years for a murder he may or may not have committed. On the day of his release, he is greeted by the detective who put him in prison. Detective Colborne is retiring and he wants to know what really happened a decade before. As a young actor at an elite conservatory, Oliver noticed that his talented classmates seemed to play the same characters on stage and off. Villain, hero, temptress, though he was always a supporting role. But when the teachers change the casting, a good-natured rivalry turns ugly and the play spills dangerously over into real life. When tragedy strikes, one of the 7 friends is found dead. The rest face their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police and themselves that they are blameless.
So yeah, this follows like a group of friends at like a drama school, acting college, and one of them is found dead. So like as you go along, you're trying to figure out who's died, who's done it, how has it happened. But I was just obsessed with it. Like I genuinely could not find one single fault with this book. Like even the fact that they all spoke in like Shakespeare quotes didn't put me off. Just absolutely loved it, and it started a dark academia kick for me, but I've not found one yet that I love as much as this. I was really surprised by it, but I absolutely loved it. So that was all of my 5-star reads of the year. Let me know what yours were, what your top rated books of 2022 were. I am hoping to have more book content out in like the new year, because it is something that I obviously really enjoy. Like reading is literally my only hobby. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.